What are genetically modified organisms?
Hi everyone, we are here to present and discuss Chapter 3, Lesson 3, which is titled Genetically Modified Organisms, Science, Health, and Politics. So before we dive right into our discussion, let's take a look at today's learning objectives for this lesson. So at the end of this lesson, the students should be able to first identify issues on genetically modified organisms or GMOs. Second, discuss different implications and impact of GMOs. And third is create a research paper on the impact of GMOs in the Philippine context. So next slide, let's start. We can have first the answer to what is a genetically modified organism. So it is a term used for an organism created through genetic engineering. So what is genetic engineering? It is a general process that involves the manipulation of the organism's genes, where it may involve transfer of genes from other organisms. Another definition as well from WHO or the World Health Organization, it is an organism, either plant, animal, or microorganism in which the genetic material, or DNA, has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally by mating or natural recombination. So everything is artificial and man-made. Okay, and also let's take a look at this diagram here in the next slide of a genetically modified organism. It is a diagram of how bacterial gene is introduced through genetic engineering to plant cells and tissues to develop and breed a genetically modified plant. So as we can see in the picture, it has a lot of process, and at the last one, we have the transformation and the breeding of the plant. Okay, and despite the success stories that we may hear from genetically modified organisms, there's also other people that oppose this idea. So through continuous search for development, genetic engineering no longer stayed in science fiction novels. It became reality in science laboratories. So a lot of scientists have practiced and also researched for GMOs. However, despite the potential and possibilities of providing solutions to the problems, genetic engineering faces much opposition still. So opponents raise ethical, social, and environmental issues related to genetic engineering and its GMOs. So to proceed, this lesson will talk about the existence of genetic engineering, specifically GMOs, in the different areas of life, the impact to humankind, and the controversies that surround.
Pleasant day to everyone. My name is Brianna Zofia T. Samson, and I am tasked to discuss to you the GMOs, or the genetically modified organisms in food and agricultural industries. So as we all know, GMO are plants and other living organisms derived from modern molecular biotechnological techniques that alter the genetics of the organism. Nowadays, it is very likely that we are eating foods and food products that are made with ingredients from GMO crops. I mean, it isn't really surprising at all kay in this era, very advanced na kaayo ang atong technology. And because of that, humans were able to do things na imposible. If we were to think back ages ago, makaingon jud tag di posible, but now with the help of technology, all things that we thought possible are made possible and also attainable. Since the uses of GMOs are widespread, let us delve in deeper about the significant role of GMOs in our food and agricultural industries. Why is it that people decided to use genetically modified organisms sa atong food and crops? And what are some things GMOs are modified to do? So the Center for Ecogenetics and Environmental Health, or CEH, identify the following roles of GMOs in the food and agricultural industries. So number 1, pest resistance. So pest resistance in our genetically modified plants to resist certain pests. This is basically one of the reasons as to why the use of GMO is becoming widespread. As we all know, pests are often the enemies of every farmers. Kay not only kanon nila ang crops, which in turn reduces the amount of crops to harvest, but also if daghag pests, then it is most likely nga mosped na pud og manual effort para mo palit og pesticides, which is really hassle sa part sa mga farmers. That's why some farmers use GMO plants, because the pesticide is already there. It is already produced inside the plants, rather than constantly using spray on the outside of the plant. Pest-resistant GM crops have been genetically modified, so they are toxic to certain insects. They are often called Bt crops because the introduced genes were originally identified in a bacterial species called Bacillus thuringiensis, wherein the bacteria produce a group of toxins called cryotoxins, which are the reason as to why the Bt crops itself is resistant to some pests or insects. A great example for that is the Bt corn. So Bt corn is enhanced through biotechnology to protect against insect pests. It is modified with the gene of Bacillus thuringiensis, a soil bacterium that produces proteins which is toxic to corn borers or worms. So the next one is virus resistance. So these are genetically modified plants to resist certain viruses. So they did not only modify certain plants to be only pest resistant, but they also modified it to be virus resistant as well. So plant viruses can be serious pathogens in crops as they can cause anywhere from minor losses to total crop failure. These plant viruses can ma-contaminate siya sa imong other nga tanom, and what happens if ma-spread ang virus sa imong other nga tanom? Then it is most likely nga ma-reduce ang harvest. Because of the speed of infection and the devastation that crops can suffer, farmers focus on preventing the introduction of these viruses which can slow or reduce the spread. As a result, one of the strategies na ilang na-come up in order to reduce or totally prevent this problem is the engineer resistance to the viruses themselves, wherein a gene or a part of genome of the virus is introduced into the host plant to confer resistance against the virus from which the gene was obtained. So one of the examples of this is the GM papaya or the rainbow papaya. So the papaya ring spot virus or the PRSV is known to be detrimental to papaya plants. So ang protein sa PRSV kailang gi-introduce to the host plant, which is the papaya, through a plant tissue which turned out to be resistant to the virus itself. So the third one is herbicide tolerance. So these are genetically modified plants to tolerate herbicides. So weeds, as we all know, are a constant problems in a farmer's field. So even now sa ato ang mga tanom diri sa balay, weeds kay problema dyan siya. Weeds do not only compete with crops for water, nutrients, sunlight, and space, but also it harbor insects and diseases. So generally, if weeds are left uncontrolled, weeds can reduce crop yields significantly. So farmers can fight weeds with tillage, hand weeding, herbicides, or typically combination of all techniques. So what I'm trying to point out is daghan kay disadvantages sa atong environment ang current practices for weed control. So as a result of this is the development of glyphosate and glufosinate herbicide-tolerant plants. So herbicide-tolerant or HT crops offer farmers a vital tool in fighting weeds and are compatible with no-till methods, so which help preserve topsoil. They give farmers the flexibility to apply herbicides only when needed, to control total input of herbicides, and to use herbicides with preferred environmental characteristic. So basically, herbicide-tolerant crops or HT crops are designed to tolerate specific broad-spectrum herbicides which kill the surrounding weeds but leave the cultivated crop intact. So a great example for this is the Roundup Ready soybean. So glyphosate, a herbicide for weeds, was introduced to soybeans, making it tolerant to the herbicide itself. So farmers then can spray the herbicide, killing the weeds but not the soybeans. So the next one is fortification. So these are genetically modified plants fortified with certain minerals. So basically, this increases the nutritional value of crops through either selective breeding or genetic modification. So instead of adding nutrients to the food after harvesting, the plant themselves are altered so that they produce these nutrients. It is like gi-increase ang nutrients or the mineral content sa usa ka food or condiment para i-improve or i-enhance ang quality sa food in terms of nutritional value, which in turn provides a public health benefit with minimal risk sa atong health. So an example for this is the golden rice. So golden rice has an engineered multi-gene biochemical pathway in its genome. So this pathway produces beta-carotene, a molecule that becomes vitamin A when metabolized by humans, thus making the rice grains fortified with vitamin A. So the fifth one is the cosmetic preservation. So these are genetically modified plants that resist their natural discoloration. So these are GMOs that are genetically engineered to silence genes that are responsible for browning or discoloration of food due to superficial damage. So discoloration is a natural phenomenon that occurs widely in many fruits and vegetables. So what happens to the eye if na discoloration? So typically this scenario causes a lot of food waste because it has a significant impact or effect to the quality of the fruits and vegetables. So wala man dyan mo palit nga anang mga fruits and veggies nga ni action nagka-brown, di ba? If we were to use our money man lang, then it is much better nga katong high quality ang atong paliton, right? So this is one of the common problems sa mga farmers na to karon because discoloration may be responsible for up to 50% of losses during fruits and vegetables production. So that's why it is very important to prevent this if we want to reduce the elevated economic loss and food wastage. So in order to prevent this from happening, people decided to genetically modify plants that resist the occurrences of natural discoloration. So actually, one of the example of this is the Arctic apples, which is the trademark for a group of patented apples that contain a non-browning or discoloration trait introduced through biotechnology. The last but definitely not the least is the increased growth rate. So these are genetically modified organisms that has higher yield in growth than normal species. So increasing growth rate is one of the significant roles as to why GMOs kay naa sa atong food industry. Growing plants or vegetables, or it could be fishes or livestock, takes too long sa pagpadako, right? And sometimes pa jud bisag unsaon natag amping naaman jud times nga gamay ang atong yields. And I think this last role of GMO sa atong food and agricultural industry is also very essential sa atong mga farmers, since if we have genetically modified plants or livestock, it will allow us to significantly decrease the time it takes for the crops to grow to its market size. So as a result of this, mas ma-reduce ang expenses and also ma-ensure jud ang mga farmers of greater yields when it is the time for the harvest. So a good example for this one is the Aqua Advantage salmon, wherein dali ra siya padakon compare sa common species sa salmon because a gene from an ocean pout was introduced to the Pacific Chinook salmon, making the salmon grow faster than its normal rate.
Good day everyone, my name is Alexa Balsamo. I will be reporting about GMOs in non-food crops and microorganisms. GM plants developed for non-food or non-feed purpose are plants which may be used for a wide range of applications, such as the production of industrial enzymes, raw materials for biofuels, paper and starch, medicinal products such as vaccine and antibodies, as well as other uses which can range from energy. The GMOs in non-food crops and some microorganisms involve the following. First is we have flower productions. GMOs in flower productions are seen in modified color and extended phase life of flowers. Example are blue roses. This is called blue roses, which are in reality in lilac or purple, contain cyanidin and diclocoside together with large amounts of flavonoids. Blue roses are often used to symbolize mystery or attaining the impossible. However, because of genetic limitations, they do not exist in nature. Second is paper production. Modified characteristic of trees of higher yield of paper productions. Example are poplar trees. Lignin is complex polymer in trees that is removed from wood to make paper through craft process. Through inserting genes that code for ferulic acid in young poplar trees, the lignin structure is modified, making lignite is easier to break down. Third is pharmaceutical productions. Modified plants to produce pharmaceutical products. Example are periwinkle plants. Bacterial genes were added to periwinkle plants to enhance the productions of vinblastine, an alkaloid usually added to drugs for cancer treatments like Hodgkin's lymphoma. The fourth is bioremediation. Uses of modified plants that can assist in the bioremediation of polluted sites. An example is shrub tobacco. Nicotiana oblonga or shrub tobacco is genetically modified with phytogelatin is used for bioremediation. It shows high level accumulation of zinc, lead, cadmium, nickel, and boron and produce high biomass. The fifth is enzyme and drug productions. Used for modified microorganisms that can produce enzymes for food processing and medicines. One example of this is sigitates. An enzyme used for food flavor enhancer is produced in higher quantity by Bacterium bacillus, which was genetically modified with the genes of the thermophilic anaerobe or thermoanaerobacter carrying acetylase. Another example is artemisinin. Artemisinic acid is a compound used for anti-malarial drug extracted from sweet wordwood plant. Through genetic engineering, it can be synthetically produced by yeast and bacteria with sweet wordwood plant engine. Lastly is GMOs in the medical field. Genetic engineering is playing a significant role from diagnosis to treatment of human-treated disease. It helps in the production of drugs, gene therapy, and laboratory researches. One classic example is humulin, the genetically engineered insulin dependent. In the past, insulin is extracted from the pancreases of pigs and cows that have caused allergic reaction to some diabetics in using it. In 1978, researchers from the City of Hope National Medical Center and Genetic Biotechnology Company were able to produce human insulin. This gene for insulin was inserted to bacterial DNA that was able to produce in the mass production of human insulin. In 1996, modified human insulin was approved called the Humalog.
Good day everyone, I am Rosebeth Gao to present to you the benefits of GMOs. So studies show some of the potential benefits of GMOs. So here we have higher efficiency in farming, increase in harvest, control in fertility, increase in food processing, improvement of desirable characteristics, nutritional and pharmaceutical contentment, reduce the use of fertilizer and pesticides. So those that I've mentioned earlier mostly benefits our agricultural industries. So as we all know, agricultural industries are one of the most beneficial when it comes to genetically modified organisms. So the most common GMO crops, they were developed to address the needs of our farmers, which in turn, they can help foods become more accessible and more affordable for us consumers. So the GMOs, they are enabled to allow our farmers to be better stewards of the environment. It allows our farmers to grow more crops on less land while using fewer pesticides and less water. So, its benefits of genetic engineering in agriculture are increased crop yields, reduce the cost of food production, reduce the needs for pesticides, enhance nutrient composition and food quality, resistance to pests and diseases, greater food security, and medical benefits to the world's growing. So, GMOs also impact the lives of the farmers of other parts in the world. So actually, there are over 400 million acres of GMO farmlands all over the world. So the top 5 countries that operate GMO farmlands are United States, Brazil, Argentina, India, and Canada. So some of the agricultural crops that have been approved for public consumption are already in the market. These include corn, papaya, soybean, sugar beets, and squash. So imagine how big is the GMO industry. So we are the ones who benefits it. So GMOs in agriculture specifically genetically modified crops, may be a bit more helpful to the environment as it uses natural resources more efficiently, as well as being more conservative towards the natural habitats. They help protect the harvest in areas limited in water or sunlight, as well as droughts and diseases. They may also promote no-till farming, which keeps the nutrients in the soil, as well as lesser uses of machineries, which in itself has a benefit towards the environment. So, aside from it, GMO foods can also enhance the products in numerous areas, such as their nutritional value, their color, and taste, being more defined and expressive, and their production more efficient in conserving ingredients and supplies, as well as having much more lasting life. So GMOs, both in food and agriculture, also affects the medicine industry, in that the GMO foods can actually be supplemented for vaccines and the like, as well as already the existing medicines being improved upon through more potent and enhanced herbs and other ingredients. So now let's continue to the potential risk of GMOs. So despite the promising claims of GMOs, the opponents of GMOs claim otherwise. So for example, there are studies that show a link in the adoption of pesticide-resistant GMO crops to the significant growth of super weeds that became pesticide-resistant too. So, the opponents of GMOs have the following major concerns. First, since genetic engineering is still a young branch of science, there are inadequate studies on the effects of GMOs to human and the environment. Second, genetic engineering promotes mutation in organisms, which the long-term effect is still unknown. Third, human consumption of GMOs might have the following effects: more allergic reactions, gene mutation, antibiotic resistance, and nutritional value. So despite the benefits that GMO provides, there are still disadvantages that GMO have. And also since genetic engineering is still a young branch of science, we cannot fully trust into it. Dili pa kita makasalig niya unsay ang mga effects gyud nato. What if magkadugay or mga long-term effects kay bati di ay. So we cannot fully adhere our trust to this kanang branch of science pa. And this topic will be further discussed to you by the next reporters.
So good day everyone, my name is Belgrace V. Ramos and I'm going to report about the potential environmental risks caused by the GMOs. So Carkey 2006 summarized the perceived potential environmental risks caused by GMOs. So the identified major risks are the following. The first is the risk in gene flow. So there is a potential risk of the modified gene to be transferred from the GMO crop to its wild relative or organism in the soil and human intestine when ingested. So as shown in the picture is a decaying GMO plant na makapossible siya transfer sa modified genes to the bacteria and fungi into the soil. So, bacteria and fungi are capable of using a genetic material from their surroundings. Yet, wala pa studies na show of effects sa absorb modified genes sa other organisms. So, the next slide is the emergence of new forms of resistance and secondary pests and weed problems. So GMO crops resistant to certain pesticides may trigger new form of pest resistance, while GMO herbicide-tolerant crops may lead to the other use of the herbicides, which may trigger new form of weed resistance. So mo na ni ang overuse of herbicides sa plants nga makakause of new form of weed resistance. So the next slide is the recombination of virus and bacteria to produce new pathogens. So the modified gene can be transferred and integrated in the viral or bacterial genes modification or mutation. So this living modified bacteria may cause a new disease na makaharm sa or effect sa other organisms and the human beings. So the next is other direct and indirect environmental risk caused by GMOs according to Molfino and Suku 2008. So direct environmental risk is introduction of the GMOs in the natural environment may cause disruption of the natural communities through competitors or interference. The second is the possibility of unexpected behavior of the GMOs in the environment if it escapes its intended use and may pose threats or become pests. Third is may cause harmful effects to ecosystem processes if GMOs interfere with the natural biochemical cycles. And lastly is the persistence of GMO genes after its harvest may cause negative impacts to the consumer of the GMOs. So next slide is the indirect environmental risk. So first is the alteration of agricultural practice like managing negative impacts of GMOs in the environment such as evolution of insects, pests, and weed that became resistant to GMO crops. Next is may have impacts to biodiversity caused by the alteration in agricultural practices. And lastly is it may have varied environmental impacts due to GMOs interaction and release in the natural environment.
There has been an increasing public interest for information concerning the safety of these GMO products. Concerns generally focus on how the GMO may affect the consumer or the human health. One specific concern is the possibility for GMOs to negatively affect human health. This could result from differences in nutritional content, allergic response, or undesired side effects such as toxicity, organic organ damage, or gene transfer. So the following are some potential human health risks identified according to Actor 2001. So the first one is consumption of GMO may have adverse effects since it is not naturally or organically produced. So when we say adverse effect, it may upset the stomach, dry mouth, and the likes for the reason that it is not naturally made or produced. And that's how our body reacts. Second is consumption of GMO may alter the balance of existing microorganisms in the human digestive system. So there are trillions of microbes in our gastrointestinal tract, around 90% of which are bacteria. And the gut bacteria have a number of important functions such as breaking down food, manufacturing vitamins, and training our immune system. And an imbalanced gut can impair your body's ability to absorb nutrients, regulate blood sugar, and store fat. So the third one is production of toxins may be detrimental to human health. So these substances created by plants and animals that are poisonous or toxic to humans. And lastly, production of allergens may have adverse effects on humans. So it's substance that causes an allergic reaction, which is really harmful to human health. In the Philippines, the Supreme Court has ruled against the use of BR eggplants, another genetically modified crop according to Ogiko 2016. So the Supreme Court of the Philippines in December 2015 ordered a permanent ban on the failed testing of GM, genetically modified eggplant, and a temporary halt to all applications for contained use, import, propagation, and commercialization of GM crops and product. So after the Supreme Court found that there exists a preponderance of evidences that the release of GMOs or the genetically modified organisms into the environment threatened to damage the ecosystems, and eventually the health of the Filipino people from the consumption of the GM plants or the GM eggplants. So the following are the other potential health risks that raise major concern. Are first is the Human Genome Project or HGP. Second is mutation of genetically engineered microorganism, and the third is cloning. So the first one is Human Genome Project, mapping of human genes to provide framework for research and studies in the field of medicine. So it was thought that the ability to generate human genetic data would lead to bias or prejudice and give those with the data a lot of power at the expense of those who didn't. And the second one is mutation of genetically engineered microorganisms. So genetically modified bacteria and viruses may mutate to become more resistant or virulent that may cause more dreadful disease for human beings. So these includes enhanced pathogenicity, emergence of a new disease, pest or weed, and also increased disease burden if the recipient organism is a pathogenic microorganism or virus. Also, it increased weed or pest burden if the recipient organism is a plant or invertebrate, and an adverse effects on species, communities, or ecosystem. And lastly is cloning, the asexual reproduction of an organism using parent cell through genetic engineering. So the first clone, Dolly the sheep, born to a surrogate in 1996, was a genetic copy of a 6-year-old sheep. So Dolly only lived to 6 years old herself. The bottom end of a sheep's average life expectancy is at the age of 5, she developed arthritis, and the researchers put her to sleep at the age of 6 because of tumors in her lungs, which may have been in the genome of the original. There have been over 100 research studies comparing the effects of traditional food to genetically modified food, the results of which have been reviewed in various journals. In knowing who to trust and what to believe regarding this topic is an ongoing battle between the major groups, including the World Health Organization or the WHO. So they have concluded from the research of the independent groups worldwide that genetically modified food are safe for consumers. Regarding toxicity, this includes any dangers related to organs, health, mutations, pregnancy and offspring, and potential for transfer of genes of the consumer. So what are the risks? So the results of most studies with the GM foods indicate that they may cause common toxic effects such as hepatic pancreatitis, renal or productive effects, and may alter the hematological and the biochemical and immunology parameters. So toxicity are among those risks. Genetically modified organisms are good and bad with abilities to cure ailments, but at the same time, they still need tons of research to be sure that they cannot hurt humans in the long run.
Good day, my name is Regine May Borja. So the next topic is biosafety of GMOs. So right now we will cover the concepts of biosafety. Why biosafety is important for GMOs and what are the related biosafety issues. You already know what GMO is, or genetically modified organism. Now we shall uncover the definition of biosafety. So what is biosafety? Biosafety is the term used to describe efforts to reduce and eliminate the potential risk resulting from biotechnology and its product. As the genes are derived from various organisms, as we see on the GMOs, concerns raised regarding the safety of such organisms since the beginning of technology in 1975. International organizations develop principles and treaties that somehow ensure biosafety on GMOs. Some of these initiatives are as follows. International Food Code. It is responsible for the development of standards, codes of practices, guidelines, and recommendations on food safety. With the pressing issues and concerns on GMOs in 2003, it has developed principles for the human risk analysis of genetically modified or GM food products. So the Codex Alimentarius or Food Code is a collection of international standards, guidelines, and codes of practice to protect the health of consumers and ensure fair practices in the food trade. Codex standards are used worldwide to harmonize the national food safety regulations and are recognized in the WTO Agreement on the Applications of Sanitary and Phytosanitary or SPS measures as the international reference point for food safety. When food producers and traders comply with Codex standards, consumers can trust the safety and quality of the products they buy, and importers can have confidence that the food they ordered will meet the specifications. Next is Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. Established in 2003, it is an international environmental treaty that regulates the transboundary movements of living modified organisms or LMOs. So the Cartagena Protocol requires exporters to seek consent from the importers before its shipments of LMOs. Over the last decades, there have been a rapid advancement in biotechnology. Modern technology aims to develop living modified organisms or LMOs to improve food security, decrease pressure on natural resources, and develop novel products for use in health, agriculture, environmental management, and manufacturing. This protocol was adopted to create accountability for any damage to biodiversity. It aims to ensure that activities involving living modified organisms are safe for people and planet. The last one is International Trade Agreement on Labeling of GM Food and Food Products, an agreement that requires exporters of GM food and food products to label their products and give rights to importing parties to reject or accept the GM product. So, customers always choose which product to eat. That is why GMO products should be labeled. The related issue is need for certification agencies specializing in certifying the GM nature of a product. However, labeling may create confusion among consumers and add to the cost of GM products.
Good afternoon everyone, I am April Alvarado and I will be presenting to you the GMOs in Philippine context. Introduction of GMOs in our country created issues and controversy similar to the other countries with GMOs. There are of course proponents and opponents of these issues. So in this slide, we have here the dates and the events that has happened with regards to the GMOs in the Philippines. So first, in 1990, the GMO concern started with the creation of the National Committee on Biosafety of the Philippines through Executive Order Number 430 of 1990. In 2002, the Department of Agriculture released Administrative Order Number 8, the guidelines for the importation and release into the environment of GMO plants and plant products. And in the same year, the GMO importation started. The Philippines was the first country in Asia to approve commercial cultivation of a GM crop for animal feed and food in 2002, when it allowed GMO corn planting. So in 2004, the Philippines were classified by International Service for Acquisition of Agribiotic Applications as one of the 14 biotech mega countries, according to James 2004. So the country grew 50,000 or more GMO crops annually. And in the same year, June 30, Senator Juan Flavier filed a bill on the mandatory labeling of foods and food products with GMO. However, the Senate did not pass the bill. So next slide. In 2006, the Philippines became part of the Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety. So what is Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety? It is a legally binding global protocol aimed to ensure the safe transport, the management, and the use of living modified organisms created through modern biotechnology. So in 2010, the Organic Agriculture Act was issued, encouraging organic agriculture than GMO-related agriculture. So this act declares that the policy of the state shall be to promote, propagate, develop further, and implement the practice of organic culture in the Philippines. So prior to this act, several provinces like Negros Oriental and Negros Occidental agreed to support the organic agriculture. There was an establishment of the Negros Organic Island through a memorandum of agreement, and with the two provinces, which are the Negros Occidental and the Negros Oriental, these two provinces banned the entry of GMO and living GMOs in their provinces. So in 2012, Representative Teddy Casino, together with the other congressman, filed a bill to push the mandatory labeling, which is the same bill that was filed by Senator Flavier on 2004. So in 2015, December 2015 to be exact, the Supreme Court of the Philippines ordered a permanent ban in the field of testing of GMO eggplant and a temporary stop to all applications for contained use, import, propagation, and the commercialization of GMO crops and products. After an assessment of scientific evidence, the Supreme Court found out that there exists a majority of evidence that the release of GMO into the environment threatened to damage the ecosystems and eventually the health of the people in the Philippines from the consumption of the GMO eggplant. And lastly, in March 7, 2016, 5 government agencies passed a joint Department Circle No. 1 series on rules and regulations for research and development, handling, and use transboundary movement released in the environment management of the genetically modified plant and plant products derived from the use of modern technology. So these agencies were the DOST, Department of Agriculture, the DNR, DOH, and the DILG. So this development is expected to lift the temporary ban on research, field testing, commercialization, and importation of GMO crops and biotic products in the country.
So the number of hungry people in the world has increased over the last few years. Now as many as 1 in 9 people in the world go hungry each day and suffer from nutritional deficiencies. As a result, the problem is not that we aren't producing enough food, but rather that people lack access to food. Many people do not have enough money to purchase food and cannot grow their own. According to the World Food Program, countries with the highest level of food insecurity also have the highest outward migration of refugees. Approximately 11% of the world is undernourished and about 39% of the adult population are overweight. So some of us are eating of someone else's part. So together with my group mates, we had come up to a solution that might help lessen the hungry people, which we identify as the current global challenge or issue. So first is we must reduce a food waste. So if storage facilities are improved and there are adequate preparations for how the food will be used, less food will be wasted and there will be more food secure community. Second is we must improve existing infrastructural programs. So some farmers fail to get their produce to the market because of poor infrastructure, including roads, storage facilities, and food processing equipment. So it ends up rooting in the farms than being taken to those who need it or for processing. So if the infrastructure is improved, more food will be available in the market and the food insecurity levels can go down. Second, or the third one rather, is promote diversification. So focusing on a single food crop or staple can produce terrible outcome for food insecurity reduction. As such, to improve food security, there needs to be training on the importance of diversified and healthy diet for better nutrition. So with more varieties of food and an education community on the importance of a diversified diet, there will be a sufficient staple foods available in the market. And the fourth one is we should work towards defeating climate change. So climate change is severely affecting our lives and the production of food. So if we fight climate change and farm sustainably, we will be able to ensure that there is enough food for us and future generations. So it is an additional step in fighting food insecurity.